You catch that cedar breeze drifting off the porch, sugar? It's the same hush-sweet scent that slips through the screens each June and tugs me, gentle but stubborn, straight back to an attic window I once called the whole wide world. Name's Gloria May Harper, 70 years young this spring, though these joints creak like the 8th note of an old hymn. I speak slow on account of spending 20 years with nobody but my own shadow for company. Now, sweetheart, while this memory's fresh, and my tea's still warm, would you kindly tap that little thumbs up below and leave me a word or two? 5 seconds, bless your heart. It lets these stories wander farther than my feet ever did. Thank you, honey. Anyhow, that breeze carries cedar and old floorboards, like pencil shavings warmed by sunshine, and every time it brushes my cheek I'm 10 again, barefoot, braid too tight, asking Mama why the front door never opened for me. She said the world was filthy and God wanted me hidden. Next thing I knew, the lock clicked, and the attic swallowed every season, every birthday, every lullaby. If you listen close, you might still hear that hush, rain tapping shingles, mice gossiping in the rafters, my own voice reciting psalms to the dust. I named those moats after stars I'd only read about: Betelgeuse, Polaris, Little Bear, because a child's heart will build galaxies when her floor space is smaller than a parlor rug. I carved tally marks in the joist, but after the first 1,000 days time stretched like taffy and I let the numbers slip away. That window became my calendar, pale in February, molten in July, gold coins of autumn drifting past like promises someone else had spent. Tonight the moon slanted through the porch railings at that very angle, and my chest tightened the way it does when a storm decides whether to break or move on. That's why I flicked on this camera, dear heart. The breeze said, Gloria, speak before night carries you off again. And Lord love me, there's a knot in my throat older than some folks have been alive. Will you sit with me? Maybe fill your own mug while I unwind it. By the time the crickets hush, you'll know why a mother locked her child in an attic for 20 years and what she showed me the day she finally turned the key. I remember the smell of kerosene from the lamp Mama left me, sharp enough to sting my eyes, and the way the flame jumped whenever the house sighed. On Sundays Mama would kneel outside the door and slide a plate of cornbread through a crack, singing Rock of Ages soft as a summer breeze, never once asking if I needed anything more than scripture and air. In the darkest hours I invented a friend made of patched up felt and sawdust, called him Mr. Theodore Bear, and told him every secret thought I dared not speak aloud. He never answered, of course, but his button eyes caught the moonlight and made the room feel one heartbeat bigger. When dawn finally broke, it painted the rafters peach and gold, and I'd promised myself, Gloria, today you'll find a way out. Then night returned, and the promise folded in on itself like paper wet with tears. Tell me, darling, what would freedom taste like after 20 years of dust? Land's sakes, child, let me roll those years back like pie dough and show you the sweet slice of forever I trusted before the attic stole it. It was late spring of '63 by Walnut Creek, Arkansas, just a thumbprint on the county map where a cotton rose kissed pine and neighbors borrowed sugar without asking. Our clobbered farmhouse leaned tired but proud, paint peeling like pages of a handbook, porch swing humming whenever the breeze nudged it. The screen door squeaked mercy each time Mama carried supper outside, and fresh laundered sheets flapped hello to the road. Papa had already gone to glory. Heart gave out one frosty morning, and his absence felt like a chair pulled back from the table, yet the world still shone butter yellow to me. Morning chores came with daylight: gather eggs, chew possums, stir grits till they burped. By noon we hauled water from the pump and soaked our ankles in a tin wash tub before the heat climbed any higher. Evenings we shelled peas on the steps, humming in the garden, watching fireflies scribble glory notes across the yard. Saturdays Mama scoured floors till they shone like brand new nickels. Sundays she sang louder than the preacher so heaven wouldn't overlook our humble pew. Her faith was flint, strike, and spark, and I thought sparks were sunlight in disguise. Summer smelled of honeysuckle curling through the fence and the green bite of fresh-cut hay. If thunder grumbled, I'd dash barefoot, mouth open, tasting sky. Mama fussed but let me, saying the Lord watered children same as crops. Nights I swung my window wide, counting stars, Polaris first, then the Big Dipper till crickets droned me asleep. In velvet hush I dreamed of city libraries, chalk dust and lockers clanging like cymbals, places the radio called New York and Chicago. I'd practice spelling chrysanthemum under my breath, certain that single blossom of a word could open any door. Our schoolhouse sat 5 miles away, but Mama kept me home, claiming lessons under her roof were pure. Still, I read seed catalogs cover to cover, enamored of words like germination and marigold. I stitched stories on flour sock scraps, acting them out for Mr. Theodore Bear, my stuffed companion rescued from a rummage sale, a gent with one shiny button eye, solemn as a deacon, who never told a soul my secrets. Looking back, sugar, I recognize fine cracks in Mama's smile, the way her gaze snagged on strangers' cars, the tight twist of her wedding band, how she whispered scripture as though warding off invisible gusts. But to 10-year-old Gloria May, the world was biscuit warm and exactly my size. I'd have sworn on my Sunday shoes that kindness buttered every biscuit, and folks, no matter how far they roamed, always circled home for supper. Goodness gracious, I clung to that notion like a barn cat to drier heat, never guessing doors can close forever, never sensing the shadow already creeping across Mama's thoughts. Had I known, dear heart, I might have held daylight tighter. Mercy me, the day everything tilted began plain as cornbread, but by sundown the air itself felt cross-stitched with thunder. It was May 14th. 1963. Funny how certain dates etch deeper than wedding rings, and Mama was humming Blessed Assurance while snapping beans by the well. A dust cloud rolled up our lane and set the sycamores shivering. Then out stepped Brother Calhoun, the circuit preacher with eyes like wet gravel and a Bible big enough to cow a mule. He'd come, he said, to inquire why little Gloria May hadn't been marking her seat at the county schoolhouse. Truancy board sent a letter, which he unfolded like a verdict. Mama stiffened, lips working silent scripture, and I, peeking round the porch post, felt my heart rabbit against my ribs, not from guilt, but from a sudden, dizzy hope. School meant chalk squeaks, new friends, maybe even a glimpse of far-off cities I spelled in my daydreams. Brother Calhoun laid a gentle hand on Mama's wrist, but that tender gesture cracked something fierce and hidden. Her eyes glazed like pond ice. She hissed that the world dripped sin, that God kept me set apart. The preacher pressed on, quoting, "Suffer little children to come," yet each word he offered seemed to drive another nail into her fear. I wanted to shout I'd mind my manners, I'd learn my lessons, I'd bring honor home, but my throat locked tight as a cedar trunk. Then came the rail jolt. A delivery truck rumbled up, driver hollering about a crate for Mrs. Harper, supplies she'd ordered from some revival catalog. She signed, waved him off, lugged that wooden box inside, and barred the screen door behind her. Through the slats I caught a glimmer of metal, iron hasp, heavy padlock, rough boards. My pulse pounded like rain on a tin roof, though I couldn't yet name the dread blooming in my chest. After sundown Mama called me to the parlor. Lamplight jittered over her face, drawing deep hollows beneath her cheekbones. She cupped my chin, voice syrup-soft yet quivering. "Baby, the world is filthy and Satan prowls. The Lord told me last night we must shield your soul. She stroked my braid once, twice, then pressed a key into her apron pocket. I smelled kerosene, sweat, and the faint sweetness of lilac water she saved for Sunday, scents that braided themselves into warning. "Upstairs now," she whispered. I obeyed, feet heavy as river stones, confusion sparking with every creak of the steps. In the attic doorway, Mama's fingers trembled, but her gaze blazed righteous fire. The iron hasp gleamed on new-hung planks, and when that padlock clanged shut, the echo throbbed clear down my spine. Shock washed through me like well water in winter. A single thought clanged louder than the lock: I can't breathe without the sky. Tears threatened, but stubborn pride held them. Instead, my pulse raced strange and wild, like some caged bird testing its wings, though bars scraped bloody. Mama's footsteps faded, then silence, vast, humming, alive. I sank onto the splintery floorboards, palms buzzing, mind cartwheeling between terror and an odd, electric wonder. Was this punishment or beginning? I couldn't explain why my heart kicked faster, why some small ember in my chest insisted I'd write my own story on these rafters one day. Outside, frogs croaked lullabies, and Brother Calhoun's truck backfired down the road, taking with it the last echo of ordinary life. In that breath, I understood nothing would ever fit back the same. Not schoolhouse dreams, not bean-snapping afternoons, not even Mama's hints. And though the moon rose silver and serene, its light felt like a question seared across the ceiling. "Gloria May, are you strong enough to outgrow these boards?" Land, O Goshen, child. Those first weeks in the rafters tangled hope and terror so tight I could scarcely tell one from the other. The attic smelled of pitch and mouse droppings, hotter than a July skillet by noon and cold as creek water come nightfall. The window pane was my only clock, its light scooting across the floor like a slow silver beetle. At first, Mama climbed the steps each dawn with a tin plate cornbread, maybe stewed okra if the garden was kind, and her voice rang syrup sweet through the keyhole, quoting scripture about obedience. But before long her visits thinned to a knock and a clatter, then just the scrape of the plate sliding under the door. Outside I heard chickens squawk, screen doors slam, the neighbor boy pedaling past hollering about marbles and tree forts, and every sound jabbed me with the knowledge the world kept whirling while I sat in stillness. One sultry afternoon a wasp slipped through a crack and stung my wrist. I yelped loud enough to rattle shingles, but Mama never came. That's when a wild anger flared, hot, bright, scary as lightning in dry wind. I pounded the door till my knuckles split, shouting that I wasn't dirty, weren't no devil hitching a ride in my heart, but the only answer was that padlock's cold grin. Come midnight, I wept into Mr. Theodore Bear's thread barrier, ashamed for hollering like a heathen, ashamed for still loving the woman who'd barred me away. Both shames tangled up like fishing line round my ribs. Days melted one into the next, counting rafters, tracing sunbeams, praying for something, anything, to break the hush. And then it did. A pistol crack argument floated up from the yard. Mama and old Mrs. Dunlap, our quilting circle neighbor. Mrs. Dunlap's voice quivered with alarm. "Where's that girl, Viola?" School's asking. Preachers worried. Mama hissed that the Lord's ways were private business. Their words rose like wasps in a jam jar, and I realized someone out there cared enough to pound on our secrets. Yet hope curdled quick, feet stomped off, wagon wheels creaked away, and silence clamped down worse than before. That was the moment a new question rooted deep. If folks suspected something, why didn't they storm the door? Did shame make me invisible? Night after night I wrestled that dilemma till stars blurred. Was I to stay pure by obedience, or stay alive by rebellion? I feared the first might kill my spirit, but the second might damn my soul, or worse, prove Mama right about corruption creeping in. I started hiding scraps of bread in a cigar box, planning to slip out the window and shinny down the rain spout. Yet the thought of Mama weeping over my ruined salvation froze my feet. So I lived suspended, hunger growling loud as thunder, heart galloping each time a wagon rattled past, mind teetering between wait, she'll come to her senses, and run before the walls close for good. No comfort but whispered psalms and the thrum of my own blood, no witness but his stuffed bear and God himself, and some nights I wasn't sure even he could peer through those shingles. That tug of war, loyalty versus survival, set its claws in me then, darlin', and truth be told it never fully let go. Lord have mercy, I can still taste the dust swirling in that beam of June moonlight the night the padlock finally rattled. After 2 bowed knees decades it sounded like Gabriel's own trumpet, yet my blood iced over quicker than cream left on a cellar shelf. 'Cause freedom and fear busted through the door arm in arm. Mama's footsteps creaked across the attic boards slow as funeral bells. She carried a kerosene lamp that threw her shadow tall and crooked, like some split oak cross stretched over the rafters. "Gloria May," she whispered, voice trembling between pride and panic. "The Lord says it's time for you to meet your sister." Time itself hiccuped. I remember the lamp flame freezing mid-flicker, and even the house mice going mute, as if all creation hunched to see which way my heart would break. I rose, knees shaking, breath snagged in my throat, clutching Mr. Theodore Bear like a battle flag, though his stuffing was more dust than cotton by then. Mama led me down the stairs I'd memorized only by sound, walls blooming unfamiliar wallpaper the color of ripe peaches, and each step felt like stepping off the edge of a well. We reached the parlor, and there she was, a young woman of 15 with chestnut curls glossy as ribbon candy, wearing a Sunday dress I'd once imagined for myself. Her name was Julie, Mama said, foundling from Little Rock Orphanage, raised in sunlight and hymnals downstairs while I counted seasons in the rafters overhead. Julie's blue eyes widened till they mirrored the lamp glass, her hands fluttered to her mouth, and tears spilled silent as dew on morning glories. In that suspended blank, bare feet on fresh waxed floor, kerosene tang in my nostrils, Mama's knuckles white around the lamp handle, I felt the earth tilt off its axle. All the bedtime stories I'd mumbled to the rafters about folks returning, all the prayers that Mama loved me best, cracked apart like pond ice in first thaw. Betrayal tasted metallic, sharp enough to slice the tongue. An ache bloomed fierce from belly to skull, a grief so vast it swallowed sound. Yet twined through it, like honeysuckle strangling barbed wire, sprouted something wilder, marvel. Here stood proof that life did swirl beyond the attic, schoolbooks, laughter, birthdays I'd only scratched on splintered joists. My lungs seized, unsure whether to gulp air or wail. Mama started reciting the Beatitudes, shaky as a worn-out record, and that's when the clock above the mantel, Papa's old regulator, stopped dead, pendulum frozen midway. I swear the whole room breathed in and forgot to breathe back out. My voice finally cracked loose, small and rusty. "Mama, why her and not me?" The question floated like smoke, no louder than a kitten's cry, but it peeled the paint from every secret in the house. Mama's lips quivered, then her shoulders collapsed, years of iron conviction sliding off like a torn shawl. She pressed the lamp to her chest and sobbed, because God asked it, though even she sounded unconvinced. Julie crossed the floor before Mama could blink, wrapped her arms around my brittle frame, and in that embrace I felt 20 winters melt into one hot rush of tears. I lost my childhood in that second. Sugar, lost it clean, but I gained the awful, holy clarity that no lock can keep daylight from rising again. Something inside me straightened its spine, The attic girl died, and the woman survivor inhaled her first real breath. I knew forgiveness wouldn't bloom overnight, maybe never fully. Yet a seed had been sown the moment Julie's heartbeat touched mine. And as the frozen clock ticked once more, I understood this. Mama's faith had boxed me in, but my own choice, love or bitterness, would decide whether the door stayed open. Land o' Goshen, child. The hush that followed that night felt heavier than iron filings in a mason jar, and I swear the silence had shape, like fog that won't burn off no matter how fierce the sun. Mama carried her lamp back down the hallway, each footstep fading until only the tick of that resurrected clock and my own thready breathing kept company with the dust. Julie fixed a cot for me in her room, lavender quilt, store-bought pillow, so soft it swallowed my ear, and though my bones ached for rest I lay wide-eyed till dawn, stunned by the sheer luxury of sheets turned down by another's hand. Morning painted lace across the curtains, and I tasted a strange, bittersweet ache, freedom so fresh it stung like peroxide poured on an old wound. The days that followed unspooled slow as molasses in January. Julie showed me how to twist the faucet for warm water, how to strike a match without flinching, how to sip cocoa that didn't come lukewarm from a dented tin cup. But each ordinary marvel carried a shadow. I'd freeze in grocery aisles, dizzy from fluorescent glare and colors shouting louder than any hymn, cereal boxes, glossy apples, magazines whose headlines felt like riddles written for somebody else's life. Folks in town whispered plenty. Some offered pitying smiles. Others crossed the street as though survivor were a contagious word. Mama, meanwhile, folded in on herself, rocking on the porch swing for hours, lips moving around prayers that sounded more apology than conviction. She'd reach for me, stop halfway, and stare at her own hands like they'd betrayed her. When winter rolled and she took to bed and seldom rose again, leaving me with a hollow where anger should have lived. I expected fire, got only ashes. One blustery Monday, Reverend Thompson drove us to the county clinic, scribbled acute post-isolation trauma on a pad, and set me up with Miss Clara, a therapist kind enough to let silence count as speech. For months I sat in that tiny office knitting my fingers together while the radiator clanked like ghostly chains, trying to name feelings that had no grown-up words, shame wrapped in longing, love braided with terror, hope afraid of its own echo. Some days I craved the attic stillness, missing the predictable arc of sunlight on familiar boards. Other days I lunged at the horizon, desperate to swallow every mile I'd been denied. Nights, Julie and I whispered under shared quilts, she reading me passages from her school books, I teaching her constellations I'd sketched in dust. Sisterhood grew awkward, but earnest, two saplings bending toward the same frail patch of light. My faith, once poured neat from Mama's jug, spilled and spread thin across new questions. Where was God while the lock rusted? Why did thunder visit rafters and leave sins untouched? Yet in the hush, between clock ticks, I sensed a gentler presence, one that didn't need walls or fear to keep me near. I started writing again, this time on clean paper Miss Clara supplied, letters to my younger self, promises to the woman I might yet become. And though emptiness trailed me like a loose hem, it no longer tripped me flat. I learned to stitch it into something useful, a pocket for compassion toward anybody else wandering lost between silence and song. Darling, I wasn't the same girl who'd counted motes and moonbeams. She was gone, but in her place stood a survivor learning the strange grammar of daylight, piecing together a life that could hum even when the porch swing creaked on windless nights. Land o' mercy. One February dawn, a robin lit on the kinked gutter outside Julie's window and sang like spring had already signed its name in the sky, and that thimble-sized hymn stitched a fresh seam straight through my weary hide. Miss Clara had been nudging me toward a community college night class, intro to creative writing, scrawled in hopeful chalk, And though the very notion of fluorescent hallways and strangers' eyes jellied my knees, that robin's trill said, "Gloria, you've carried stories in your marrow longer than some folks carry bones." Julie pressed $3 crisp into my palm, called it an early birthday gift, and drove me to campus in Mama's rattling Ford. The heater wheezed, headlights jittered over frost silver fields, and I kept smoothing my thrift store skirt like manners might keep me from flying apart. The classroom smelled of paper and possibility. Mr. Whitaker, a gentle fellow with ink-stained cuffs, asked us to write a memory no longer than our breath. My pencil trembled, yet words poured out like creek water after a storm, sunbeams caught in attic dust. The scratch of a lock, the clock that stopped mid-tick. Before I knew it, the page filled and my pulse steadied, as though sentences could braid themselves into a lifeline. When Mr. Whitaker read my piece aloud, the room fell hush enough to hear chalk settle. Then one gray-haired lady whispered, "Child," that broke my heart wide open. I walked out under a moon sharp as a new dine, lungs ballooning with something perilously close to pride, and for the first time since the rafters I caught myself humming off-key, sure, but alive. That sliver of courage grew like beans after rain. By April I was volunteering Saturday mornings at the Walnut Creek Library, reading picture books to toddlers whose giggles bounced off the stacks like bumblebees. Their bright eyes never questioned my crooked smile or halting voice. Every once upon a time felt like balm poured over old splinters. One mama whispered I had the softest cadence, asked if I'd ever thought of recording audiobooks for shut-ins. The idea fluttered around my head, timid but persistent, and I tucked it close like a seed in warm soil. Even Mama, frail under crocheted quilts, began to stir when I practiced essays at the kitchen table. She'd close her Bible, listen, and sometimes, just sometimes, her lined mouth would quirk into the shy ghost of approval. One twilight she murmured, "Tell the world what the Lord carried you through," and though hurt still yawned between us, I recognized a bridge being laid, plank by trembling plank. My journal thickened with sketches of days I'd missed, county fairs, locker doors, first dances imagined in syrupy detail. Yet each invented scene sharpened my hunger for tomorrow rather than dragging me backward. Faith, once welded by fear, now breathed like a meadow breeze, gentle, bending, spacious enough to hold doubt without snapping. I planted marigolds along the porch, bright guardians against darkness, and when they bloomed July gold, I laughed so loud the hens startled. Course, nightmares still rattled their rusty chains some nights, but dawn kept proving itself, and every sunrise asked the same tender question, "What little brave thing will you try today?" So I kept showing up, pen in hand, voice a-tremble, till habit turned to hum, and hum to quiet joy. Sugar, isn't it something how a single burr note, hardly big enough to measure, can tip a whole life toward the light? Well, darling, the day I finally laid the attic ghosts to rest wasn't stormy or trumpet loud. It was a plain Tuesday in late September, the sort of mild afternoon when the sky wears its easy blue housecoat and cicadas hum like a porch fan set on low, just steady enough to keep a heart company. Julie was away at nursing class, Mama slept thin and raspy in her downstairs room, and I found myself standing at the bottom of those steep steps with a satin ribbon shoebox cradled against my ribs. Inside waited Mr. Theodore Bear, patched anew. One button I still shy, and a stack of attic scribblings Miss Clara had convinced me to gather, prayers scratched on pantry labels, birthdays guessed on cracker cartons, dreams drawn in charcoal on scrap wood. I climbed slow, one creak per breath, tasting dust and recollection in equal measure, until the door swung open without so much as a sigh, because Julie weeks earlier had snipped the padlock clean through and replaced it with a brass latch no stouter than a pinky promise. Sunlight poured across the floorboards like fresh buttermilk, showing every splinter I'd once memorized in the dark, yet none of them could hurt me now. I knelt beside the little window where moonbeams used to be my only almanac and set the shoebox down, hands trembling not from fear but from the holy heft of choosing my own next breath. "All right, baby girl," I whispered to the girl I had been, "time we make room for tomorrow." First I opened the window wide and let autumn stride in, cool and clean, swirling the stale air into ribbons that danced around my ankles. Then I lifted each brittle scrap of memory, kissed it, thanked it for keeping me alive, and fed it to the breeze. The paper fluttered out like pale moths, skittered once on the roof, and vanished into the bright hush beyond these. I pressed Mr. Theodore Bear to my cheek, felt the corduroy patch that covered his lost ear, and at last understood he'd done his guard duty, so I tucked him on the sill facing the orchard, a silent sentinel for whatever lonely child might someday climb those stairs in search of courage. I did not burn the attic, didn't slam the window, didn't vow revenge. I simply stood, spine tall as River Cane, and breathed until the rhythm of my own lungs felt louder than the echo of locks long gone. Downstairs the clock struck 3 plain, persistent chimes, and in that moment I decided to forgive Mama the portion my bones could bear and leave the rest to God's arithmetic. Forgiveness wasn't a ribbon cutting or a jubilee. It was choosing, minute by minute, not to carry her shackles in my purse. I whispered the decision into the wooden beams, let it soak into pine and pitch, and on the exhale I swore I heard the house itself settle, like an old quilt finally shaken out and smoothed across a bed. When I stepped back into the hallway the light seemed wider, the floorboards kinder, and my steps whispered future instead of fear. Later, over weak lemon tea, I told Mama I would be reading my stories at the library's harvest supper. Her watery eyes glistened with something between sorrow and relief, and she squeezed my hand so gently I almost missed it. That night I slept sound, no attic dreams prowling the corners, and woke before dawn with marrow humming steady gospel truth. The past had happened, yes ma'am, but it was not entitled to the deed of my tomorrow. I chose living full, messy, unpromised living without grudge, without pause, just onward like a river that refuses to remember every stone it scraped. Honey, I reckon that's the best kind of miracle, not lightning in the heavens, but a quiet heart choosing daybreak all on its own. Land, oh mercy, looking back across those 7 decades feels like running a thumb over a quilt my granny pieced. Some squares bright as sunrise, others dark as cellar night, yet every stitch keeps the warmth in. I once thought 20 locked-up years were a snug that ruined the whole pattern. Now I see their tough denim patches holding the softer cotton together. Turns out a heart can learn its shape in the dark and still lean toward light the instant a window cracks. That's the first truth I've earned. Pain is not the opposite of purpose, it's often the blueprint. Second thing is this, and lean close, darling, 'cause it's quieter than preaching. Hope isn't the loud trumpet everyone's waiting for. It's the robin that sings before the frost has even left the fence. You've got to decide to believe that note when all you can see is bare twigs. I was nearly 50 before I understood believing comes first, seeing later, and sometimes seeing never shows at all, but believing still changes the weather inside your bones. Don't wait for proof. Plant the marigolds anyway. Third, love won't always show up dressed as sweetness. Sometimes it's a sister you never ordered crying over your dusty shoulders. Sometimes it's a therapist pushing a scrap of paper and a stubby pencil. Sometimes it's your own pulse reminding you at 3 a.m. that you're packaged with purpose even when nobody else has stamped the address. If love feels unfamiliar, that doesn't make it counterfeit. Learn its dialect and answer back. Fourth, and this one took the most carving, anger is a fine guest, but a wretched landlord. Let it stomp through, track mud, say its piece, then hand it a coat and point it toward the porch before it starts rearranging your furniture. The attic taught me that holding bitterness is like gripping thistles. The tighter you clutch, the deeper the barbs. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is simply loosening your fingers enough to open a jar of honey again. Fifth, faith. People think faith is grammar-perfect prayers and starched pews, but mine now sounds more like, help me keep breathing till noon, Lord, and remind me where I left my glasses. It's less about locking doors on sin and more about opening windows for mercy. If your version of God makes you build cages, set him down gentle and see if a kinder vision walks in. And lastly, time. Folks say it heals, I say it hands you thread. He links your own quilting, one hesitant stitch every sunrise. Some cloth tears easier than others, some days you knot more than you sew. Keep going till the needle knows the road by heart. So here's my soft-spoken dare to whoever is sipping tea on the other side of the screen. What attic have you mistaken for destiny? A job that starves your laughter, a hurt you keep feeding with reruns, a dream you labeled too late. Baby, the door might already be unlocked, you just have to turn the knob. And if it isn't, call out. Some Julie is waiting below with bolt cutters. Either way, stop counting dust motes and step into the hull. Life serving cocoa, and the steam spells your name. That's the quilt I wrap around myself on cool evenings. Broken doesn't mean finished. Waiting isn't living, and stories yours, mine. The worlds are meant to be read in sunlight. Go on now, fold up this tale, press it to your chest, and when tomorrow taps the pane, don't pretend you're not home. Well now, sweet friend, you've kept me company clear through the dusk and into the porch light hours, and I feel you're listening like a quilt tucked over my knees. 70 years of breath sit easier when another heartbeat answers back. I still rise before dawn most days, old habits, I guess, and when the kettle whistles I step outside to let the quiet settle on my shoulders, just the way attic dust once did. The difference is choice. I can turn that knob, feel the cool boards under my slippers, and welcome whatever sky decides to show up. Mama's rocker still creaks beside mine, though it's empty now. Sometimes the wind pushes it just enough that I hear her hum a half-remembered hymn, and I answer with my own softer psalm, stitched from equal parts forgiveness and plain old living. Julie drops by Wednesdays after her hospital shift, smelling of antiseptic and cinnamon gum, and we trade stories like swapping seed packets, hers full of newborn cries and midnight miracles. Mine of marigolds that refuse to quit blooming no matter how October nips at their petals. Somewhere in the yard, Mr. Theodore Bear keeps watch from the attic window I left ajar. Teenagers speed past, never guessing a whole universe was once contained between those rafters. Funny thing, every so often a swirl of attic paper, maybe one of my old prayers, drifts down beside the mailbox. I pick it up, smooth the wrinkles, and smile at the crooked child handwriting that dared to believe daylight would notice her someday. Daylight noticed, all right, and it's noticing you too, this very minute, even if you're listening from a room no one else has bothered to unlock yet. So pour yourself a fresh cup, sugar, look around at the walls you've grown used to, and ask, are they sheltering you or shrinking you? Are you waiting for someone else to march up with bolt cutters when your own courage would do the job just fine? Tell me truly, do you reckon real love, the kind that itches to set folks free, always finds its way back home, or does it sometimes need a nudge from the hands it's trying to save? That question keeps me humble on quiet nights, and I'd be mighty grateful to hear your notion in the comments below. That way this porch grows long enough to seat us all. Tomorrow I'll be at the library again, recording fairy tales for folks whose eyes have turned stubborn. Maybe you'll hear my voice in some far-off corner and recognize the rasp of survival curling around each syllable. And if you do, pause a moment, touch your own pulse, and remember, The story isn't stuck inside your yesterday unless you bolt it there yourself. I spent 20 years breathing through a keyhole and the next 50 widening that gap until it became a doorway, and I'm here to tell you the light on the other side feels warm enough to thaw regrets you don't even know are frozen. Sometimes, when twilight turns the fields the color of burned sugar, I swear I see the attic window glowing and think maybe the girl I was is up there waving goodnight, proud of the woman rocking below. And every now and then could be wind, could be wonder. I hear a faint creak on the stairs and it seems my mama's voice answers back through time, softer than ever. Go on, baby, tell it. So I do. And now it's your turn. What's single, stubborn hope is still knocking at your locked door, and what would happen if you finally let it in?